Hi, Rex here at RW Mods. Today we're going to look at this Bullitt B220 engine. This is an older version. I think they're up to actually a 224. I just got this one in. Actually, I got this one. I ended up trading this one in, and then I did a full rebuild on it. We'll show the internals. I hadn't done a review on this Bullitt before, so thought I'd take a look at it. It's OS based, so it's similar to an OS Speed. I honestly wasn't, until I took it apart, I wasn't sure which model it was similar to on the OS line. So this is actually close to the B2101, B2102. It's the 16.4 by 16.4. It's the square bore and stroke. These sell for, I saw this one probably sold for around $460 new. And OS, if you weren't aware, OS makes quite a few different engines for different manufacturers. You got Bullitt, and then you got quite a few other ones. LRP, not all LRPs are OS built, but they're high-end ones. There's more that I'm not going to think of right away, but so initially I kind of like the head color and everything. It does have the good 21J carb, the 9mm through bore on that, DLC coated crank. So it's got a lot of the good stuff. So I guess we'll tear into it here. Okay, we got the head off and the back plate screws out. Let's take the back plate off here. Okay, the sleeve wouldn't come out, so I'm gonna just catch exhaust port with a zip tie here. I did a full rebuild on this engine, so I got it at a trade-in. I actually am going to sell this engine, so the block on this engine, this one did have a steel bearing in it when I had got it apart, so I replaced it with a ceramic rear bearing and a ceramic front bearing. Like I said before, this is a DLC coated crank, 1 tungsten weight. Some of them have 2. Pretty much your standard piston. This is a 16.4 bore. You can see the dimple in the rod. That signifies this, the 29.5mm rod. Sleeve is a 3-port. Pretty much their standard looking sleeve, regardless of it being the square bore and stroke. When I took it apart, I thought this was similar to a Spec 2, but it is the Spec 2 is the 16.28 bore. Backplate's pretty much everything, all the OS. I think some of the new ones actually have a little bit different backplate. This one did have some. The fuel they ran in it kind of just tarnished a little bit, but nothing, wouldn't hurt anything. I do like the head button on these. This is a nice smooth chamber. Some of the newer ones, newer OS engines, kind of a really small dimple in the center, and it's kind of abrupt here at the transition. And I'll sometimes rework those. a little bit, but I like the way these are built. These older ones, the 21J carb, they're pretty. They're one of the easiest to tune of the OS. This one does have a 6.0 restrictor, which I feel is a little bit small for this engine. If you're on a small track or you're kind of looking for some fuel mileage, that might work well. The head on this is it's kind of the standard semi-low CG head. It does. One thing I did like about this engine is the notch here is for the exhaust, so it's sitting down, so it has some clearance for your manifold on there. But OS on the Bullitt actually puts the writing facing the right way towards the front of the car. On a lot of the speeds, the OS branded, the logo faces to the rear of the car, and it just makes no sense to me. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine. And some of the OS heads, maybe that don't sit this low or whatever, do not have this cut, and so you can just flip it around if you want to. So this, like I said, this engine is pretty much identical to the B20101, and the B20102 I believe is just the low head version. They tend to be more of a buggy engine. I'll go through the numbers here. The Bullitt B220 is 16.4 by 16.4 bore and stroke. Blowdown's 42. Induction open is 154. Induction closing is 69 for a total of 223. Now those numbers were almost identical to the B20101 that I had previously entered in my computer and stuff. So it's basically a rebadged B20101. And the engine, the B20101, I've had guys send one to me and they're looking for a little more bottom end. I think some guys have, and it's short rut up jumps on a truggy, they might have trouble, but on the good side, it is a good buggy engine where it's not overpowering on the low power, so on the low end, sorry. So I believe part of it is the bore and stroke, and then another part would be, I think, the induction closing. That's the crank window. What is it? It's in the block. That's the basically the induction opening and closing is your crank window as it opens and closes. And I think the induction closing is a little later than on some engines, maybe more like you'd have on an on-road engine or something. So I think that's part of the reason why it doesn't have a ton of bottom end. But it's all a trade-off. If you have a lot of top end, an engine's smoother, has more top end, it doesn't have the low end, and if an engine has a lot of low end, it generally doesn't have as much top end. So the timing numbers are pretty good. It's not something you really can open up and dramatically increase the timing. Could get maybe even a little more top end with the blowdown, but the blowdown's actually pretty good, 42 to 45. I like to see. So all in all, I like the engine. I like the head. It's something a little different than other brands and stuff. It's got the good carb. So like I said, I rebuilt this engine. I got it in on trade. On my rebuilds, I polish up the head button. I clean up the piston top, get the carbon off there. Like I said, this person ran some fuel that kind of discolored some things, but the rod bushing is very little wear. I think maybe, I don't even remember for sure, but it was like a half thousandths or less. And with the DLC coated crank, unless you run sand or dirt through it, the DLC coated crank doesn't wear. So this engine, I picked it up. I think I'm going to be selling it. Someone's looking for a good buggy engine. I think around the $225 range. So if you're looking for something rebuilt, a brand new Avid ceramic front and rear bearings, fresh pinch, and you can see, You can see my tooling leaves a little bit of a mark there on the resizing, and you can see the pinch. When I pinch, I don't usually over squeeze them where you need to do a big break-in process. It's I try and get them like they were after a gallon. So I just recommend preheating, run a couple tanks easy after I do a sleeve resize. So it doesn't need a full break-in. I almost would rather have a resized sleeve versus a new one if someone gave it to me, because I don't have to do the long break-in process. And so that's it on the Bullitt 220. Like I said, the 221, 222, 23 all have the same part number for the piston and sleeve, so they just made some other little changes, probably just like a year change, and I don't know, maybe the crank's a little different, or could possible the carb is different. I did notice on the new one, I think it's the 224 or whatever, it has that newer style end on the carb. Not sure if any of those came with that smaller bore carb, but that's it on the Bullitt 220. Thanks for watching.